Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chris Mitchell podcast. Hope everyone is all well and good. We've got a fantastic guest here, but before we introduce him, let's go and speak to my co-host this evening, Anglo Joe. How are you, sir? Please tell us a bit about yourself. How is the INN going? Dance floor is yours, bro.
Good evening to everyone. Good evening, Ed. I hope you're well. Yep, I'm Anglo Joe. I helped to found the INM, which is the Independent Nationalist Network. We're a group of guys and gals who are trying to do our best to sort of restore the heritage of our country and try and preserve it as best as we can in physical means and in the in the not so physical realm. We work with collectivizing people and putting them into regional groups and allowing people to sort of organically become friends and that sort of thing, and then do activism together, go to parades and marches together and that kind of thing, and look after the local areas. So that's kind of what we've been doing for the past 6 months or so. The website's very nearly finished as well. We've got guys who are working very, very hard on that at the moment, and it's very nearly done. So we're looking forward to that launching.
Yeah, big shout out to the Independent Nationalist Network. I will put their link in the comment section below. Also, this will be on my second YouTube channel. If you want to follow my other channels, in the description. I'm on Telegram, Odyssey, and I have 2 YouTube channels. I have to keep switching between the both over those strokes you get now and then. But let's go and introduce an absolute legend. It's an absolute honor to have you on the show, sir. Please, obviously, you don't need to introduce yourself too much, but please tell people that maybe might not know who you are, or by fluke, where they can find you, watch your weekly shows and what days and times, etc. So over to you, Sir Ed Dutton.
Well, you've elevated me to the knighthood. I think I'm Million Esquire. But thank you very much. How do you do? Thank you for having me on. Yes, my name is Ed Dutton, and I'm an academic researcher, and I have a YouTube channel called the Jolly Heretic, which is also on BitChute and Odyssey. And I put up recorded a video once a week, and I live stream on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. UK time. And I try and deal with the kind of fearlessly empirically accurate and fearlessly logical research, which is increasingly and indeed almost completely expunged from the woke cathedrals that are now our universities. And so I see I call it an online public house, the Jolly Heretic Public House, in which we drink. I anyway have London Pride. And I encourage others that turn up to drink something, and the people send in research questions and so on, and I research them, and so we look at what is increasingly called controversial research, but it shouldn't be controversial research. It's research that would have been uncontroversial 60, 70 years ago, that is purely based around the empirical data and reason. But we've of course moved away from that into a feminized, pro-feelings, anti-reason society. So that's pretty much me. So yeah, hello. If you're not familiar with my work, hello. How do you do?
Thank you. Very good intro indeed. It's got the spirits raised up. The atmosphere is feeling good. But before we move on to tonight's topics, I like to start off the show with a nice little icebreaker. Joe, you haven't been on the show since I've done this, so I'll ask you first. So, guys, if you could have like a night out, a session, it doesn't have to be like a drink. It could be anything. If you just wanted to go for like a nice meal, or the cinema, your perfect night out. Anyway, so with any 3 people in the world, dead or alive, it doesn't matter who. It's your 3 people that you would most likely go out with. So, like, for example, obviously my audience will know my 3. I chose Cole Pilkington, Tyson Fury, and Paul Gascoigne. That's who I got on a session with anyway. But we'll go to you at first, Anglo Joe. Who would you pick?
Oh God, people aren't going to like me saying this at all, but it is purely because he's such an interesting man and his policies were just mind blowing. So my first would be Oswald Mosley, 110%.
I thought he was going to say me then, but
he's just that would be my number 1, and then number 2 would be Lenny McLean, the governor. He died a while back. People might remember him from Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, but he was like a bare knuckle fighter. He was really good at what he did, and he's a bit of a gentleman and stuff. And he had a really interesting life and interesting story. So he'd be the second one, and then who would be my third? Just thought, and then probably be Jimmy Carr, to be honest with you, just because he's so funny. He just you'd be splitting with laughter, I think. So yeah, three very different people, but I think it'd be a good mix.
I think that's three excellent choices, to be fair. Like, yeah, I wouldn't complain with a night out with those three. Sir Edward Dutton, over to you. Who
wouldn't you though, if you went out on a night on the tiles with Paul Gascoigne? He's a raving alcoholic, isn't he? I mean, wouldn't he'd get seriously drunk? He'd be like vomiting. He'd be smashing stuff up. It's not
the smashing the stuff up. I'll disavow. If you've done that, I'll disavow. But that's why we have Tyson Fury there to keep a lid on it. Do you know what I mean? And if anyone starts,
but he's bigger than him. That is true. He's about 6 foot.
If anyone starts on us as well, we got him. We've got the heavyweight champion of the world.
I didn't think of that. I didn't think of having a. Well, all right, no, okay. So I was thinking, I was thinking you said it wasn't a restaurant or whatever. That it was actually like a.
I would be going out. I'll be going out on the sauce.
So I was thinking, I want someone to make us laugh, and apparently Peter Cook. Everything he said in a social situation, everything he said would be funny. So I was thinking Peter Cook. Right, and then I was thinking Tony Blair, just because I'd like to get drunk and give him a piece of my mind. So Tony Blair, and then we'd need someone to protect us, obviously for drunken violence, Tyson Fury or whatever. And also, I just like to know the truth about what happened. So I think the third one would be Jesus. And also, if we ran out, if it was past chucking out time and we ran out of booze, then he'd be able to conjure up some more, wouldn't he? So we wouldn't run out.
I tell you what, I do not think I'm going to get a better answer than Jesus. To be fair,
that's pretty good, Ed.
That's a fantastic round of applause. Right, that's a good answer. But yeah, both great answers. So yeah. Interesting, guys in the audience. Obviously, you can put it in the comment section if you want to get involved in that little question. But let's move on. Ed, obviously, we spoke before, but I never got to speak about your childhood. So, can you just start off talking a little bit about it? Where did you grow up?
If you want to know about it, I've put an autobiographical chapter in my new book.
Oh, right. What's the new book called?
Called "Sent Before Their Time: Genius, Charisma, and Being Born Prematurely." I'm not saying I'm a genius. That is for others to say. That is for you to go home and think about later. I found in the book that there was a clear, statistically significant correlation. People that were born prematurely are which is more than a month early, are overrepresented among geniuses. Among scientific geniuses, and particularly among what you might call religious geniuses. Buddha was born 3 months early. Muhammad was born about a month early. Moses was born 3 months early. The founder of Shia was born 2 months, and so on and so on. But so anyway, I looked at that in the book, and then to give people an impression of what it's like to be very premature, I did a little bit about my own experiences. I was born 3 months prematurely. In October 1980. And at that time, the survival rate of those born 3 months prematurely was 25%. So I did quite well, and muddled through. I was born in Wandsworth. I lived near Wandsworth, opposite Wandsworth Common, until I was 2. Then we moved to the London borough of Merton. So the biggest town around there is Wimbledon. So normally I just sign from Wimbledon, and went to a Catholic boys' school. And then from there became very interested in religion, did a theology degree at Durham University. And then when I was finishing my degree, I didn't have a clue what to do. So I managed to get funding to do a master's degree at Aberdeen University in Scotland, which then turned into a doctorate. And then during that I met this Finnish girl, and then through her I met a better looking Finnish girl, and then that girl I went out with, and we got engaged, married, and she got a job in Finland, and we moved here, and then I started about here for ages as a freelance university lecturer, freelance journalist, whatever, and then gradually just built up more and more freelance work and more academic stuff and so on. And then over that period, I've written about 16 books and published various articles, and that's pretty much me. But you want to know about my childhood, though, specifically? I don't know what more detail I can give you about that.
Well, just how life was for you growing up. Obviously, I grew up as a working class on the council estates. Going to, you get into the odd little fights and whatnot. But how was it for you? Obviously, you grew up. Would you say you grew up in a more privileged background than that?
Not really. Not really. I mean, well, my parents. It was a terraced house, 1920s terraced house. My parents both art teachers.
Okay.
So, despite my accent and whatever, I didn't go to private school. My father's side was quite moneyed. My grandfather went to a public school, what we call public school, King's Chester, and then they were what you'd call gentry, I suppose. And the family tree goes all the way back to like 1066. Odard, first Lord of the Manor of Dutton, and then from there back to the Duke of Normandy. So that was that side. They were very wealthy. My mother's side was council estate in Winchester. So family tree, we did shepherds, people like that. Couldn't read. Not quite a different pair. And yeah, they're both teachers. That's how they met, through being teachers. So no, were there fights? Well, there was. I mentioned it in the book. Actually, I was being a bit of a spurg. I didn't quite understand, because I had this friend, you see, and he had a little brother, and he hated his little brother, and I dreaded that my parents would have other children. I'm an only child, and I dreaded they'd have other children because he was always getting in trouble for everything. It was always his fault, and little brother could do nothing wrong. So he hated his little brother and told me so. I assumed that was true of everyone. But it isn't. And this got me in trouble with this thug boy with Irish parents that lived down the road. But otherwise, no, there was no fight, nothing like that. No. Nor at school. I mean, other kids might get into fight, but not so much. Not
yourself. How so obviously in school. So, but how would other people treat you? You must have obviously been really like a genius at school.
No,
as well.
no, I was no. I look at this in the book as well. No, because I was born prematurely. I was born 3 months early.
Yeah,
and this has a big effect, and in particular, it causes brain damage, and it takes it a long time for the brain. The brain then commandeers other parts of the brain that haven't been destroyed by lack of oxygen and whatever, and it uses those parts of the brain to solve problems that it can't solve with the bits of the brain that it would normally solve them with. So what you end up with is an unusual psychological profile. So in terms of intelligence, you might be very, very intelligent at some things and very, very stupid at other things. Whereas normally, if a person's intelligent, they're intelligent at everything. For example, I'm 41 years old. I've only just learned to drive. It's taken me that long for my spatial intelligence, which is rubbish, to be good enough to be able to do something like that. So things like that. So no, I was quite a late developer. I failed my 11 plus. And then so I was very good at art. Both our parents were art teachers. I was always very good at art. And always very good at linguistic stuff like English literature, that sort of thing, but terrible at maths. And somehow I suddenly became much better at not at mechanics. I was very bad at the spatial, the physics type maths, but very good at the algebra from the age of about 14. And then I was put up to the top. The school was in sets, and at 14 I was put up to the top set. I'd always been in the second set. And then I did very well in my GCSEs and A levels, and then things just sort of changed. But no, I wasn't until that time, until the age of about 14. I wasn't among the cleverest. Then suddenly I was. I think one way that I stuck out two ways that I stuck out. One was that I walked literally like a thunderbird, because being born prematurely, I literally walked like a thunderbird. It was like a spastic. They say spastic.
Do you still walk like a thunderbird?
I still walk with a limp. I still have an unusual gait. But I don't walk like I pick my feet up now, whereas I didn't used to do so. So I'd always trip over and have patches on my trousers and cut knees and whatever. Till the age of about 14. So I stuck out in that way, and then at secondary school I stuck out because of my accent. Because most people will, this, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you know what I mean? I come from South London, know what I mean? You know what I mean? In it, not mine. I thought I knew other people that deliberately changed, whose parents were middle class, I suppose, whose parents deliberately changed their accents deliberately in order to sort of fit in. And I neither had the wherewithal nor desire to do that. So I just stuck with the accent that I'd learned from my father, who was, as I said, from this sort of more upper middle class background. And so some people would be like, "Oh yeah, how posh, oh yeah," or whatever. And then at university that quickly dissipated, because of course I was at Durham, and that was full of people from Eton and so on. So no longer.
Would you say he was a bit of the? Oh, well, you might not know what it is. I hope. Well, I'm sure you might. Would you say you're a bit of a Jack the Lad back in the day? Was you a bit of a hit with the women growing up?
No, I don't. Well, I think that I remember being asked out quite a lot by girls, but I was being born early and thus perhaps mildly autistic. I hated the idea of change, and going out with a girl meant change. So I would eschew their advances. I suppose I was tall. I reached my current height when I was 14.
How tall was that? Do you remember?
5'9".
Oh yeah, that's what I am now.
Which I was 5'9" at 14, and then just stopped. And then other people sort of grew up around me.
Yeah.
So I was very tall as a teenager, so that was useful. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I was a Jack the Lad. No.
All right. Would you say like when you was in your teens or even late teens, do you reckon that did you have any aspirations to be anything else different from what you've become now? Did you have a dream of becoming, like I don't know, in anything different to what you're doing now?
Interesting question. I had vague notions when I was a teenager of wanting to be some kind of academic, probably an historian.
Yeah.
And that was the subject that most interested me. And I'd always have a particular area of history that I was into at any given time. And I'd read books about it voraciously. And I would, I guess I was 9 years old, my Lego would reflect it. So the way you could make Tudor times Lego was by mixing medieval, because it's much easier now. There's all these different kinds of Lego, but back then it was just the big four: space Lego, Danish home Lego, pirate Lego, and medieval Lego. So by mixing medieval Lego and pirate Lego, then you could kind of create Tudor Lego. So I was very into history, and then I went through a phase of being interested in law and being a lawyer, and I did work experience when I was 15 at a solicitor's office, which was incredibly boring. And then after that, I became more interested in the arts and whatever. For quite a long time, I used to write poetry, which was published, and plays. I had a play on at the Edinburgh Festival, things like this, and comedy sketches. And that was as an undergraduate. And then towards the end of that, I just got back into my subjects again and the idea of just being an academic. So that was what I was. So I sort of went full circle from age 14, wanting to be some kind of academic, 15, to by the age of my early 20s, once again wanting to be some sort of academic. So there was something about that, but except it wasn't history; it had become theology, and then from there it moved into evolutionary, to anthropology and evolutionary psychology, and some history. I've published some history articles actually. So yeah, I've kind of ended up doing what I vaguely wanted to do when I was in my early teens, so yeah, this is probably what I would be interested in doing. I don't know about the stuff making videos. I don't know how that happened. It's weird that kind of happened.
Yeah.
But certainly the researching and writing books is what I kind of always saw myself doing.
And have you always considered yourself kind of on the conservative side of politics? Has that always been with you, or was there a particular time when you kind of sort of leant over that way? I mean, I don't know if you sort of officially politically kind of align yourself. I know you're quite.
What do you mean if I leant over that way?
No, but yeah. I mean, how would have?
No, I've never been a pinko. No, absolutely not. No, I remember as a child, the things stick with you as a child, and I remember listening to a Roald Dahl book on tape. And there's this line in his revolting rhymes, and he goes, "A judge would say, without a blink, 10 years hard labour in the clink." And I must have heard that aged about 5 or something. And I said to my mother, "What's that mean? Labour, hard labour. What does it mean?" She said, "Oh, it's a punishment for doing, a crime. They send you to prison and they make you, smash up rocks or whatever. That's labour, that is." And I was like, and then I discovered there's this political party called the Labour Party. And I was like, what kind of appalling people are they that they want to make us all do labour? They sound awful. And then added to that, you had the fact that they had this ugly, ginger-haired, bald Welsh leader.
I watched the Ginger Talker. Yeah,
and so that sort of horrified me. So no, and then also you've got to add to that I like being a bit of a contrarian. And as I became politically aware, everybody was, oh, I'm going to vote Labour. Oh yeah, Mr. Tony, New Labour. Oh, all this new Labour, all this crap. These obvious liars, these obvious disingenuous people who had denied everything they'd ever stood for just overnight in order to try and get into power, obviously utterly disingenuous. And so I'd always been appalled by them. I always thought that my experience of left-wing people is always that left-wing people they're snobs. They want to seem good. They're everything that when Jesus says in the Bible that you shouldn't give money in order to seem to be doing so, but for its own reward. Well, they're everything that goes against that. They want to be seen as good. They look down on others. They sneer at others. They think they're morally better than others. They project their own insecurities about their own moral failings onto other people. And ultimately, I was very aware with New Labour. It was so obvious that these people are just power hungry, and they're signalling that they're kind and compassionate and all that in order to get power, and that really they're not motivated by anything other than a desire for power, and also by their own jealousy and loathing and whatever. And there was also an effeminacy to them as well, if you compare Tony Blair and his gang to with the exception of the ones that come from working class backgrounds. People like that, I can understand why they'd vote Labour. In a very poor country, it's just elevating their own sort of genetic interests. But with the people,
obviously, I was just a child back then. Sorry to interrupt there. You can continue, but was it really immigration getting out of control more when it was under Tony Blair?
Well, it did get out of control. It did get out.
Oh yeah, it's got out of control. But was it mainly because of him?
No. I would always have been conservative. I remember being very happy that Labour didn't win the 1992 election. I've always disliked left-wing people. It's obvious to me that what they're about. They are about individualism. They're about themselves. They're not about the good of the group. They bring about pointless change, and I hate change. They have no respect for history or sanctity or truth, and they often kind of weak people, physically weak, emotionally.
What about the Conservatives now? Do you not think that they're pretty much left wing now?
I'll come to that in a minute. Who daren't be power signal, so they signal virtue and whatever in order to get power. So I didn't like them. With Tony Blair, then it really hit in, and you became really aware of it. I mean, I call myself a Blairian exile. You get the Marian exiles, which were the people that fled the country, the Protestants that fled the country under Queen Mary because they didn't want to be burned as Protestants. They're the Marian exiles. I'm a Blairian exile. So, I thought he just did so much damage to the country, took away fundamental freedoms and trial by habeas corpus and whatever else, and the emotional diarrhea and chaos that you had, even right at the beginning with Princess Diana's death and people not being able to control their emotions, and then all this stuff about Stephen Lawrence and politicizing the police. It was just appalling. I mean, they laid the groundwork for a sort of the police state, really, that we have now. As for the Conservatives, the problem with the Conservatives is that they, and all right-wing people in general, is that they tend to cede ground to the left always. So you have these 5 moral foundations. You have the group-oriented ones of sanctity, obedience to authority, and in-group loyalty, and because we're pack animals, we also have to climb the hierarchy in prehistory in order to be of high status, get nice girls, and breed. And you have the individual-oriented ones of harm avoidance and equality. And it's been shown that people that are conservative, they are the same, reasonably high on all 5 of these moral foundations, whereas leftists are low on the group-oriented foundations and high on the individually oriented foundations. And this means that there is asymmetric empathy. It means that the right can sympathize with the left, but the left can't sympathize with the right. So the right will always cede ground to the left until the left creates such chaos, such an evolutionary mismatch where there's no focus on binding values, that there's a right-wing backlash. So what I would expect of the Conservative Party, and what they always do, is that they are just a slower version of the Labour Party. They're just
haven't Conservatives now broken the records of the amount of immigration since Labour, though?
I've no idea whether they have done that, but I don't think there is. I mean, part of me would say to that we are in the winter of civilization, and what you get in the winter of civilization is a general melee where people just don't care anymore. People are so decadent and they have such a high standard of living that they don't care. So there's not the will nationwide or even Europe-wide to do anything about it. It's exactly the same when you had massive immigration into Rome. That people just don't, or Athens or Baghdad towards the end, people just don't care anymore. They just care about material things, or even post-material things, such as their feelings and being, and so they don't. There isn't. I just don't think there's the will to do anything about it. And what you should do, obviously, if someone comes across from France on a dinghy and claims asylum, is say France is a safe country, go back to France straight away. No debate, no question, no discussion. But there isn't the will to do this. We've become this feminized society in which everything is we've tipped over towards women's. This is like what a communist dictatorship. If you imagine like the communist dictatorship, but with a vagina, that's what we've tipped towards. And so there isn't the will, I think, to do anything.
Just to mention, go on, Joe. No, actually, go on.
No, sorry, it's just going to lead on to a bit of a question that I sort of thought of that I wanted to ask you. You did a video about 6 months ago on why the West's cultural revolution is only just beginning, and I watched it at the time, and I rewatched it a couple of days ago in preparation for this. And what I wanted to ask you was, I'm sure you remember the precipice of the video. But do you believe that it's now advanced more with everything that's going on with COVID and these seemingly kind of, these people that are waking up so quickly to COVID?
Yes, I do. It's one of the things.
Sorry, just interrupt there, Joe. Be careful with that word because we're going to be on YouTube, so we'll just call it the bug or something.
The bug. Okay, sorry.
I had no idea you were going to be on YouTube. I'd have been far more careful with what I said. I didn't know.
Oh no, it's okay. If it gets banned, it gets banned. I don't mind that much. I've got two.
You might want to delete that. You might want to cut that thing I said just a minute ago. But in answer to your question, yes, I think that what happens in this stage of civilization is that you get is that people have a very low levels of stress, very low levels of mortality salience, and also very low levels of harsh Darwinian selection pressure, meaning that you get more and more mutant sort of people. And these people are going to be more individualistic because what we selected for under harsh Darwinian conditions was to be strongly group oriented. So you're basically going to get more and more people at the genetic level that are more and more selfish. And you're going to get people that are like less religious because there's less mortality salience and less of an awareness of death. And eventually those people will reach a sufficient percentage, either in the elite or more generally, where about 20%, something like that, where the whole society will tip over in their direction. And then you're going to start to get to reap the bitter harvest of you're going to have a society with much higher genetic diversity than it previously had. That means lower trust. And then because it's concerned with individualizing values rather than with the good of the group, you then start to it questions everything that's the sanctity is not important to it, the religion, which tends to get evolutionarily and group adaptive things and make those into the will of God, that's not important. In-group loyalty or loyalty to your ethnic group, that's not important. And so then everything's undermined. So you start to get feminism, the rise of women. This was documented in Baghdad, it was documented in Athens, it was documented in Rome. In Baghdad, you have women lawyers, for goodness sake, women judges, and so you get the rise of this, and then this creates these sort of feminizing values where everything's about equality and harm avoidance and feelings and nothing to do with logic or reason or the good of the group or whatever, and immigration. And this all helps to create then as well, once you have higher immigration, lower social trust. And this has been documented enormously. Once you have, we trust people more if they're genetically similar to us. What you have with a society of dysgenics is a much larger gene pool. Plus, if you have immigration, this undermines trust between the immigrants and the natives because they're quite genetically distinct and so they don't trust each other. But it also undermines trust within the natives, because the natives start to become concerned that other natives will use the immigrants as a means via which they will collaborate against them. So the natives start trusting each other less. They start cooperating less. You get this general sense of dysphoria as well. Like it's been shown, there was a study, it's cited in E.O. Wilson's book, The Social, or I forget the name of the book. It was his 2012 book. And he shows, if you show people images of people of a different race who are strangers to them, they react with fear at a very, very deep level, at a very, very primal level. So having that kind of society then creates a constant sense of dysphoria and low trust, and then people have fewer friends, and so there's lower and lower and lower trust, more and more paranoia. And this COVID thing and the reaction to it has catalyzed this. Because of you have a society that is run by these fearful, neurotic left-wing people, because there is a correlation between being left-wing and being neurotic, and this makes sense because if you're left-wing, then you are an individualist, and the world is a frightening and unpleasant place, and therefore you are jealous and angry, and therefore you want to get equality, and you fear harm, because you're neurotic, but you have other neurotic traits such as paranoia, and whatever, and so therefore you are Machiavellian. You want to get power over people, and narcissism as well, which can be a response to negative feelings. You have that as well, and you always feel there's some bad, evil, racist, or whatever that's against you, even when you've got power. And so it creates this profound lack of trust. And it catalyzes the lack of trust. And this COVID thing has symbolized the collapsing trust. And the more they try and do something about it through censorship, through obvious lying, through just everything to try and hold together the polity, the worse it seems to get, because the more it shows that they're dishonest. What happens at this stage of civilization is that trust becomes so weak. Intelligence is declining as well, by the way, and intelligence is associated with trust. So that's another factor. The polities break up. And that's what I think is definitely happening in America. It's going to break, like the Soviet Union did. It's going to break up. And I think Britain's going to break up. And all of these polities will break up.
I'd see, just as you talk there, and you sort of explain through that, and you can put that into a physical example with like London. So to put it in an example, like I'm one of these people where I can't. You've met me before, Chris, haven't you? I can't walk down the road without talking to every single person that I bump into. You know, every person. Like, how you doing? Morning, you're right. You know, and I just talk to everyone. And I remember going to London, and that's me. So I'll be on the tube, and I'll be sort of like, I'll talk to someone. How you doing, mate? You're all right. And they look at you like you're an absolute madman. You know, it really did. It took me a little while to spend.
That's because I don't understand your language. That's why.
No. They were English enough to, to talk to you. I would have overheard them speaking. But what you're saying is right there, Ed. It's a trust thing, because it's so individualized in London that you're in your little bubble at all times. Whereas where I am is kind of a bit more homogenous, I suppose. So there's that trust there, So generally, your guard is down all the time with your local people, aren't they?
Social trust will be high in areas that are homogenous, and what people therefore naturally do is they create areas that are homogenous, and that's what immigrants have done. And in London and in various other places, they have essentially created their own enclaves, which are homogenous. And in those areas, social trust will be high. And it's what white people have done. They have fled from certain areas of London to other areas of London, and they have gentrified those areas. I can think of areas of London that have become more white over the last 20 years. But in becoming more white, they've also become more middle class. They've gentrified. And that's happening to various areas of London as well, Walthamstow. And they will naturally create these communities. And what I suspect is going to happen is this will start to happen on a larger scale. You will get literally white people fleeing from certain parts of Western Europe to let's say Eastern Europe, and you are getting white people removing themselves in large numbers from, let's say, California towards Texas, towards Montana, towards places like that. So this is what you get at the end of civilization. You get these movements, you get the breakup of nations as people are in an evolutionary mismatch and feel a sense of dysphoria and feel unhappy. And what the less intelligent people, the people with the less sort of get up and go, they'll just stay behind and merge and die out, or merge into the immigrant population. But the more intelligent ones will get out. What will be interesting is what will happen to the woke type people, to the alphabet people. as they have been termed, because I mean, I've got a book coming out on this in the summer called "The Past is a Future Country: The Coming Conservative Demographic Revolution," in which we look at big data. We get big data sets in order to look at who's breeding and what the likely consequences are going to be of that. And basically, what's happening is intelligence is declining. But if you control for intelligence, then the only thing really that predicts breeding is that you are conservative and that you are religious. And those two things are strongly heritable in the region of 0.7 genetic. And so what that means is that as the society declines into chaos and breaks up, you're going to get the percolation upwards into positions of power of sort of Nick Fuentes types. Or at least more cerebral sort of incarnations of him. Who knows? And people, one suspects, will break away, will move away into little Byzantiums, little refugia of civilization, where European civilization will be maintained. And there will be people who are, let's say, Hindu or whatever, who will have to choose what they're going to do. And I suspect they will white a line, and they will come into the Byzantiums, and there will be whites who will be, you know, the sort of Mick Philpott type whites, those kinds of people, that will just stay behind and merge into the third world that will be surrounding these Byzantiums. That's what I would expect to happen, and that's exactly what happened last time. That's what happened with the collapse of Rome. Exactly the same. You had in the year 1071, 300 boats full of Anglo-Saxon notables left England for Byzantium. England was Dark Ages, chaos. You know, it had been invaded by the Normans as well. Awful place to be. And so they went to Byzantium. You had lots of cases throughout the Dark Ages of intelligent, educated people from England going to Spain, because that's where the intellectual hub was, or going to Byzantium. And that's what you would get. The more intelligent type people would be sucked out into the place that was preserving civilization, and the rest would just fall into decay and chaos, and perhaps Darwinian conditions would be reimposed, and selection pressure would be reimposed, and child mortality, which is currently 1%, but was 50% in 1800, would go up until things change.
Ed, do you actually think or believe that the English people, or the European people, or just the white people in general, have an actual genuine chance of becoming extinct with the amount of immigration going on? Obviously, we have a very low birth rate. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the amount of immigration going on, the amount of mixed race marriages, despite what you might think from watching all television programs,
all the average
commercials, is extremely low. It is like an ichthus compared to a bow tie of monoracial marriages. And even where those mixed race marriages do occur, they tend overwhelmingly to be between people who are relatively genetically similar. For example, Native Americans and white people, or white people and East Asians. It's very rare to have a union between, let's say, a black person and a white person, which is what we're constantly shown all the time on television.
But,
so no, in terms of,
I mean, like, I know what you're saying, like overall, but like if I'm from Birmingham, but you do see black and a black man and a white girl quite a lot in an area like Birmingham. But I know that's still quite small on the overall.
But it's still statistically quite small. It sticks out in your mind. But it's very interesting that it's that way round. That says quite a lot.
Yeah.
Because it means it talks of a sort of fast life history strategy. If you're a slow life history strategist, then you invest in nurture, and you want to have offspring that are very, very genetically similar to you, so that you will bond strongly with them, and you will be able to nurture them well to survive in a competitive ecology. If you're evolved to sort of live fast, die young ecology, then it pays to have sex with someone that's genetically dissimilar to you, because they might have some unusual gene that will help the offspring to survive in an unstable ecology. So you would expect people that were live fast, die young type people to engage in outbreeding. And that's therefore what you would see. If you also look at black men, they're physically very masculinized, high testosterone, again, helping you in an unstable ecology. So you would expect a woman who was unstable ecology evolved to go for a black man.
Do you also not think it's because of like the white girls as well? Do you know?
No,
what
I doubt
do you
very
not
much.
think that at all?
I doubt very
I've
much
actually
the
known
average.
girls before that says, "Oh,
I
white
doubt.
people, slavery, you know, all this nonsense.
I
We
doubt.
colonized the world."
I doubt very much that the average slapper in Erdington is concerned with white guilt when she's getting a bit of black cock. I don't think that is something that goes through her mind. No, I think it is a perfectly understandable evolutionary process. And as for the question about the us dying out,
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, one thing that could happen, what you have is a process of dysgenics. So until 1800, we're under harsh Darwinian selection pressures. Every generation, there's 50% child mortality. Anybody that is genetically or mentally unhealthy is selected out. And what we now have is many generations of that not happening. And we are now down to child mortality rate of 1%. So this means that 90% of the people that are around now would be dead, would have died as children, or otherwise not passed on their genes if we were under pre-industrial conditions where there was no proper medicine, no inoculations, that sort of thing. As I've said, I think the most extreme examples, what I've called spiteful mutants, these people, it's been shown, that have very left-wing opinions, and that it correlates with severe mental illness, with suffering from serious depression, bipolar disorder, and whatever, and it correlates with being physically unhealthy as well. So these people, these mutants, these are the people that would have the left, basically, the far left, are the people that would have.
Can I just interrupt? That was actually one of my questions. I was actually going to ask you, do you acknowledge the existence of spiteful mutants on the right or just only on the left?
That would have died of scarlet fever in previous times. I was asked that question last night on my show, on my live show.
Oh, yeah.
And the answer is yes, because what you've got with what we had is very strong evolutionary pressures towards intelligence, because that helps you to solve problems in a cold, difficult, competitive ecology, towards group orientation, because that helps you to fight other groups and dominate them for resources in a cold, difficult, competitive ecology, towards mental health, which crosses over with group selection because it's to do with having a pro-social personality, and towards physical health. And so broadly, therefore, we were selecting a high agreeableness, high conscientiousness, low neuroticism. Those things predict being essentially religious and conservative. So what you would expect is that a mutation would be associated with any and religious in the sense of the collective worship of a moral God. So what you would expect is that any deviation from that would be associated with mutation. Now, overwhelmingly, because we were so right-wing and so conservative and so religious, the deviation from that is in a left-wing direction. So what you see is that, for example, it's been found that the faces of people that are conservative are on average more symmetrical and are considered better looking than the faces of people that are left wing. Why? Because the faces of people that are conservative have lower mutational load. And if you have mutational load of the body, you will sure as damn it have mutational load of the mind, because 84% of the genome relates to the mind. So obviously it makes sense. If you've got an asymmetrical face, you've got mutations, you're physically, genetically ill, you're going to be mentally ill. And those two things correlate. Intelligence also correlates with having a symmetrical face. Why? If you have mutations, it's going to make you less intelligent, and this is going to be reflected in having a less symmetrical face. And so in general, people who are mutated are going to be left-wing. But it was a very specific kind of religiosity that was selected for and was adaptive. So you could get deviations from it in a right-wing direction. For example, collective worship of moral God. Yep, that's associated with mental health and physical health. But what if you are just really religious and but also antisocial? You're just like a religious nutter that has delusions. Well, no, that person could be right wing and religious. That's associated with mutation. What if you have low IQ? And if you have low IQ, you will be likely to you will have less effortful control, and therefore you will be less likely to look around the world, realize what the dominant set of values is, understand what the dominant set of values is and the benefits of adopting them, and therefore convince yourself via effortful control they're true. Well, that person will have high mutation, but he will also be right wing rather than left wing normally.
What about the people? Like, I spoke to a woman last night that came from left wing and is kind of like on our side, maybe not all the way there yet, but like only been red pilled over the last year or whatsoever. But what do you think of these kind of people that
I finished another correlate of intelligence is trust, because if you are stupid, then you will be conned, and so it pays to trust nobody. People that are low in trust are going to be attracted to conspiracy theories, and they're going to be distrustful of authority. So you can see how that could push them towards the right as well. Psychopaths, those people are going to just like danger and whatever. What's dangerous now? Being a right-wing dissident. So you can there could certainly be spiteful mutants on the right. As for your question about this woman, it's very, very interesting that she is a woman. So one thing that is known that is higher among women than men is borderline personality disorder, and this is a function of very, very high neuroticism, such that you feel negative feelings very strongly. You feel this constant sense of anxiety and chaos, and as a result, you don't really develop a clear sense of self. And therefore, you're always looking for a sense of structure. You're always looking for a sense of order to make sense of the world. And you will do this by adopting very extreme and pronounced identities at any given time. And you will be very fervent about these and certain about these when you are holding them. But they will always be an element of insecurity, because ultimately you have these panging self-doubts and doubts about everything that you can never get over. And therefore, those people will often flip over to precisely the opposite identity. So these are unstable people. You talk in terms of religion, of the religion of healthy-mindedness and the religion of the sick soul. The religion of healthy-mindedness, the person just has religious experiences and feels God's there, and the life's there, God's there, he's comforting me, he's there for me all the time. The religion of the sick soul, William James said, is you have people that they have a fundamental sense that the world is evil, and they're deeply unhappy and deeply anxious and deeply depressed to the extent that it's kind of damaging their body. They're so anxious and worried, and they have a complete breakdown, and then they become, like a fundamentalist Christian or something like that. You have the people that are mentally unstable will go through periods of religious fervor. In general, being mentally unstable is associated with depression and a sense there's no God and whatever. But it's also associated with going through periods of fervor. And those people can flip over into different identities. There's a chap in Finland, for example, called Henrik Holopper. When I met him in 2005, he was like an overlapping Nazi. To the extent that he went to America, he spoke alongside David Duke. He was eventually arrested in America and deported and God knows what. Now he's a Green Party activist and anti-Nazi campaigner.
Wow.
Now that's not that rare, and I would suggest
I think it's more rare. I think that's quite rare. I don't really know anyone.
It's rare, but it's not in the psychological literature. It's not rare. I mean, and interestingly, there was a study on people who were fundamentalist Christians and then become atheists. So people that reject their religiosity, and substantially, those people didn't just like, oh, okay, I used to be a fundamentalist Christian. Now I don't know. I think God doesn't exist. No. They were like fervent and certain that God didn't exist. And normally it was wrapped up in something like multiculturalism or Marxism or something like that as well. So it's just borderline personality.
So would you not say like it's? Would you say like if I was in a room say if it was a room full of lefties or whatever, would you say it's just completely pointless, just trying to red pill in any way? Do you not think any of them can be truly saved to come onto our side?
Saved? I wouldn't put it in those terms.
Yeah, probably not saved, but you know.
Oh, no, hang on. We've got to. I look at this in my book, which I showed you earlier. You've got to break up the different components of what makes you left wing. So there are. If you're left wing, you're motivated by strong negative feelings. You have all these negative feelings, and you're therefore paranoid about it, and you're therefore like an individual. You're an individual in a dangerous world. if those negative feelings include low self-esteem, then you will not be able to play for status through violence because you're concerned you'll be beaten up. So you'll play for status via virtue signaling, and you'll equality and harm avoidance, and you'll want to do that as well because you'll have a strong sense of jealousy and whatever, and therefore going on and on about equality will mean that you will get relatively more. Going on about harm avoidance will mean that you'll be harmed relatively less. Now, there are some people that are so motivated by this desire for equality that they're so jealous that even in a left-wing society like we have now, they are countercultural because they have such a deep jealousy and hatred of any kind of power. So
well, you know what's funny as well? So I know you say left-wing society. The left wing actually don't believe it's a left-wing society. They actually think it's.
Of course they don't. Of course they don't, because they're high in neuroticism, and so therefore they have a strong sense of paranoia, and so they're always going to believe that there's some wicked conspiracy that has power over them. Yeah. There's always. I mean, I'm sure Stalin, at the height of his powers, believed that there's the kulak hiding around the corner who's hoarding grain or whatever. There's always somebody who they're going to, being paranoid, being neurotic, being strongly jealous and envious, perceiving other people as having more power than them. Always, they're all and thus Machiavellian, and thus they're able to obtain individual power. You're only able to obtain individual power if you're Machiavellian and you never believe you have enough. If you just rest on your laurels, oh yeah, I've got enough power now, I'm fine. Well, then someone will deal with you, won't they? So no, you always have to believe that there's somebody that, even if it's imaginary. So that's the extreme left. That's the people that were out there shouting things at Sakir Starmer and whatever the other day. They're the ones that will get in trouble even in a left-wing society because they're too radical and they destabilize the society and they cause danger. So there's them.
They also think like Boris Johnson's like a far-right Nazi, and I'm like, mate, like
exactly. I mean, precisely. I mean, the kind of people that would campaign against the Conservatives being elected. So there's those people. Then you're going to have the people that are less neurotic, and they are left-wing because we are in a left-wing society. So so they realise that this is a left-wing society. How do you obtain power? You have to be slightly more left-wing than the last person. So this creates a virtue signaling arms race whereby we move along from black people, equal women, to transsexuals, to blah 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 blah. Those kinds of people. Now, those people, we would say, they are high in social anxiety, but they know when to draw the line. They want power and status, and it's tempered by a certain degree of control. They're jealous, but it's a certain degree of control. Ultimately, they want power hunk, but they want an easy life. Certainly, they're less neurotic than the other people. Now, those people, if it was a right-wing society, they would flip over. They would be right-wing. That is why Jim Goad talks about these woke women as the new church ladies. What women tend to do, women are more socially sensitive than men on average. Women are more conformist than men on average. Women are more religious than men, and the religiousness that they're indoctrinated with currently is wokeism, whatever. Women are more socially anxious. So those people will be overwhelmingly female, and they will tend to flip. If the society flipped towards right wing, they'd be right wing. And then also you will get the contrarians. That's another thing to bear in mind. So you'll get some people now who are just contrarian. That's their niche, and they may be very right wing now, but they'd probably be quite left wing if it was a right wing society. And I mean, perhaps I'm like that. I mean, at my Catholic school, I was the screaming atheist. There was the thing that I was focused all my venom on was the church and tradition and whatever. Although no, that was tempered by the fact that I was politically conservative. So it's not quite as simple as that, because I also hated change. But you would get some people like that as well, that were attracted to whatever was not conformist. So it's not like they can't be saved. If the society, if they realize, some of them may well already have realized that society is gradually going to start moving towards the right. The breeding patterns tell us this. The coming chaos tells us this. So those people are already, I think, slowly and gradually, you're getting more and more intelligent people that are moving towards being a little bit dissident, a little bit right wing, who realize that this is the way it's going. Even someone like that black chap that used to be head of the Commission for Racial Equality, Trevor, I can't remember his name. He hosts a thing on Sky
McDonald.
TV. Yeah, sure.
Trevor McDonald.
He's gone from being like rabidly anti-right wing to kind of set sort of on the right, really.
Yeah,
because I think he has sensed the way the wind is kind of blowing, and he wants to be ahead of the game, but not too far ahead of the game that he gets in trouble. Not too far ahead of the game, but just enough ahead of the game to optimally balance, the future riches with the present riches, if you know what I mean. There are some people that will take a big hit now, financially, socially, whatever, for a big hit, for a big reward in the future, if they believe correctly that things are going to flip to the right. There's those kinds of people. And there's others that will take a small hit now for a small future reward. And that's more the sort of purple pill type people.
I think there's definitely a level of narcissism as well with the left, with regards to you have to have your sort of your letter gang, don't you? I heard recently that Romani travelers now have their own alphabet, mixture, and it does, and I think it all ties into being in that special group, isn't it? A lot of these people are sort of very self-absorbed and have to be in something that's that's different, and that's what's the word for it? Not flamboyant. I can't get my words out.
Unique.
But yeah, they want to be unique. They want to be special, don't they? That, I suppose, is the word. Whereas
they want to be special. They want to be special, and also they want to play for status in an inverted aristocracy. So in the old days, you'd get people that would, like the Hyacinth Bouquet sort of person, who would pretend she was posher than she was, that she was more middle class than she was, that she was higher status than she was. And now you have the reversal of this. You have the anti-Hyacinth Bouquet. The modern day Hyacinth Bouquet would be, like the Bouquet residence, lady of the house speaking. What is it Bruce has done? He's used racially insensitive language. I'll be right there, Violet. It would be like that. And it would be that's the kind of change that's occurred. In Finland, you get it. So, for example, you get people who years ago, to conform to Finnish nationalism, changed their surnames from a Swedish surname to a Finnish surname. And now the Swedish-speaking Finns are a minority and whatever, and have got this minority status. They want to change their names back. Or there's people that in the old days would play down that they had ancestors that were Samis, the reindeer herders of Lapland. Now they're wanting to play that up. So it's this constant pressure to be part of some sort of victim group in a hierarchy of victimhood. And that you get women pretending that these women lecturers that, pretend they're black or pretend they're Hispanic or whatever in order to get grants. It's quite Machiavellian as well. It's a way of getting money, isn't it? For some people, it's a way of literally getting money and status. But yeah, I agree. It does correlate with narcissism, which you would expect, because people that are, for two reasons. First of all, people that are highly neurotic, one way they will deal with that is through narcissism, have low self-worth and all this. They will deal with that by a kind of like borderline personality. They will deal with it via a kind of narcissism, via telling themselves that they're brilliant, but they will still have the other neuroses like jealousy and whatever, and a sense of their individual importance. So they'll be left-wing. The other group, again, the more church lady type, would be if you're narcissistic, you want love and praise and whatever. And the way to get love and praise these days is to be quite left-wing. That's how people will love you and praise you, and to be more left-wing than the last man, but not too left-wing that it pisses people off. And so the narcissist will be attracted to that. And there was a study which found that virtuous victimhood, it was called. So that is to say that signaling about how dumb by you are. This correlates, as you would expect, with narcissism. So I agree with yes.
Yeah. And do you think that the sort of the opposite to that, because you tend to on the opposite side of things, because generally right wingers don't have anything to moan about anyway, really, or we don't lump ourselves into that sort of victim category. Do you think that's because we're predominantly sort of leaning towards the more logical of the group?
Oh, I don't know about that. There's evidence that conservatives are lower in neuroticism. So if you're lower in neuroticism, they have more of a sense that life has meaning. They are more content with life. They are more mentally stable. So they're basically just less unhappy. And so if they're less unhappy, they're kind of just more satisfied with how things are, how they are. and so they would be, and they're more group oriented, much more group oriented. They're much more concerned about the good of their group. Another difference between left and right is which group you identify with. So people that are on the right will tend to identify most profoundly with in a kind of series of concentric circles from self. They will identify most strongly normally with family, then with extended family, then with their nation, then with their race, like that. Whereas people that are on the left, they won't do that. They're kind of born traitors. They will identify most strongly with, let's say, not their family, not their extended family, not their nation, but some other nation or some other race. That's where they identify first, a foreign group. And that is what you would expect of an individualist.
Well, you get a lot of hypocrisy with the left. I think I mentioned this to either someone in private or on last night's show, actually. Like you'll get on left-wing demonstrations, Islam stands with LGBT. So yeah, well, go to an Islamic country and start show them banners. It won't last very long. So
no, they're very basically Muslims.
Yeah.
But my point that if you're an individualist, the way that you will get status if you can't cooperate with your group, which is what a group-oriented person does, is you cooperate with another group in order to get status within your own group. That's what a traitor does.
Do you think that is also, I see a lot of this in our sort of group. Do you think that's because these people are unwilling or unable to defend their own views, so they simply identify with something that's so far removed from them that they could never be questioned to defend what they actually believe in? Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, so all right, to put it in perspective, so I don't need to be here on YouTube or whatever, but I am here because I care about my country and I'm worried about it because I'm willing to fight for it. Whereas that's something that I aim to sort of defend and work for because it's ours and because it needs to be defended. Whereas they tend to choose things that are disassociated from themselves and from what is theirs and their heritage. So
right, I see. Yes, I see. Yeah. Well, that makes sense because they're individualists. So if you're an individualist and you want to attain power, then it may well help you to despise and hate your heritage and everything about your people that are closely related to you. They don't matter. What matters is you. And the way that you can, if you were a person that doesn't like if you're repelled by cooperating with your in group, then you will be an individualist, and you will have the ability to be utterly ruthless, and the way that you will it will help you if you are able to identify with people that are completely different from you. That will help you to then treasonously attain power within your own group. So it will literally help you to be disgusted by your in-group if you are using that strategy of being utterly selfish. Because if you weren't using that strategy, then you would be drawn into helping your group, and you might end up making individual sacrifices, as you perhaps are doing by using your time here, for the good of your own group. So that's the difference. And so yes, they're always going to be hypocritical, because what they will do is they will signal that their method is to go on and on about what nice, kind, loving people they are, which is a method of playing for status, because we admire people who are like that. But ultimately, they're not nice, loving people. We've got the data on this. They're absolutely not nice people. It's the conservatives who are the nice people that are high in agreeableness and conscientiousness and low neuroticism. They are the opposite of that. But it is because they are like that they use this strategy, this covert strategy, because they're too neurotic to use an overt strategy in order to gain power. So they will always be hypocritical.
Really interesting. Yeah, I've wanted to ask these questions for a while, actually. No, thank you.
To move on, we've got another about 20 minutes, half hour left. Just wanted to get your opinion there, Ed, about the whole bug issue. Obviously, the whole needle issue, and there's a lot of people seem to be keeling over at the moment. A lot of it in sports. Maybe it's happening in general. What should obviously we're going to try and try and talk about this as much as we can on YouTube without being censored. But do you think there's any? Do you think it's the needle that's causing people having these sudden cardiac arrest in sports and maybe in just your general life?
I've absolutely no idea. I don't know about that, I'm afraid.
Okay,
Are we going out live, by the way?
No, we're not live. It's pre-recorded.
Right.
Okay, no, I was just talking about the jab, and you got people collapsing all over the world. Did you think it was because of the jab people are collapsing?
No, I don't. I think that's unlikely to be because of the jab. I do think that what's happened is that we have been confronted with a situation which, if we had higher intelligence, we would be able to come up with a solution, a much better solution, much more quickly. And if we were more group oriented, like even as group oriented as we were in the 60s, and therefore more religious, and therefore had more of a sense of our own eternity and whatever, there wouldn't be all this concern about the self, concern about the individual, concern about death. And they could have just let this wash through the population as a sort of herd immunity, and that would be the end of that. But the problem is that we're not that people anymore, for genetic reasons and for environmental reasons, particularly because we're now inculcated with individualism and everything being about the individual and how the individual feels. And you've even got people now arguing that people shouldn't abort children that have Down syndrome because the presence of people with Down syndrome in the society helps to increase the level of diversity in the society. Then basically that you should keep people alive that are very seriously genetically ill. Just because it's inherently good. So with that decadent, and so the result is that you have this frightened society that's been brought up to not be used to anything bad happening, so to even having its feelings hurt, to even losing a race in school. And then it's confronted with the possibility of not even itself dying, but with granny dying or whatever. And so, how do we deal with that as a society? Well, we have to come up with something. We have to come up with something to calm people, to calm down the neurotic, the extreme neurotic element, who itself has a destabilizing influence on the rest of society via social osmosis, via social epistasis. And what we come up with is a jab which doesn't work that well. And it works a bit, and we administer that jab as part of a kind of a religious ritual, almost as a sort of communion. And we wear these masks that don't really do that much. But
what do you think is causing the problems with all these sportsmen and supporters in the stadiums? That's what we're hearing. Obviously we're hearing that because sports is all that was on our TV. But there's probably what do you think is the cause behind all these sudden cardiac arrests and heart problems, blood clots?
You would expect, in a context in which people are highly fearful, in which people have elevated mortality salience, for people to be more instinctive. And when people are more instinctive, they have a tendency to be in touch with our cognitive biases, which include the over-detection of causation. And so you would expect us to be over-detecting causation in a context like this, and to be looking for things which fitted with prejudices that we already have, in order to make sense of a world that makes less sense than it used to. So what we would need to do is we would need to see, is death in sporting events significantly higher this year than it was, over the last 10 years, and there need to be a study that would need to properly
that's true. It is, though. It seems like a regular occurrence. Games are getting postponed and delayed like every single weekend now. I'm just going to give out two names. I don't know if you know them: Fabrice Mwamba and Mark Vivian Foe. They both, obviously, one died on the pitch and one pretty much almost died on the pitch. These were big storylines, but now it's just like, it seems like everyone's just passing it off. It's just a new normal, So surely this needs to be investigated more than just rubbishing it under the carpet. Do you not? Agree?
I don't. To be honest, I don't concentrate on sport or follow it in any way except the darts. And as long as no darts players keel over, then as long as Michael Van Gerwen or Michael Smith or whatever doesn't keel over, then I'm perfectly happy.
None the wiser.
There was one guy actually. I think he died of corona. There, in his early 30s. He was a Australian Aborigine and a darts player. I forget his name, and he just suddenly died last year. He got quite far, like in the PDC. He got into like the playoffs and stuff, and he just died. But otherwise, no, nobody.
John, I've just got nipped to the loo. I'll be 1 second.
Yeah, no worries. All right, we'll move on. I want to talk to you a little bit before. Obviously, we'll have about another 20 minutes here, Ed, if you don't mind, of your time. The show, you introduced him, and I don't blame you, to be fair, on YouTube. Mr. Fountain. Do you remember who? You know who I'm talking about, don't you?
Mr. Fountain, yes, I had young Master Fountain on my show.
So tell me about that, because I watched that show, and is that show anywhere to be found, by the way, or is that completely gone? Because I know
all my live streams are on BitChute and Odyssey.
Okay, so yeah, you can get it on BitChute and Odyssey. If you haven't watched it, it's a brilliant show. It's Boomer and Zoomer, and I thought it was an incredible show. But how did you find the show yourself? Obviously, I think that's the first time you've ever spoken to him. You've probably heard a lot about him. Maybe some false, maybe some truths. How did you find that show in general, and what did you think of the?
No, it was a very, very interesting experience. Obviously, yeah, I'd heard a great deal about this mover and shaker, sorry, and I thought that would just be an interesting person to chat to, and when you've got a fair few followers, you know, they're prepared to come on, and he'd heard of me anyway. He'd heard of my stuff anyway. And so I said, okay, well, you know, would you mind coming on? And he was fine. He was a very friendly chap. He was a very articulate chap. All I'd really seen was all the sort of groyping and all that sort of stuff. You know, the sort of more childish, whatever you want to say, component of his oeuvre. But he was. I was surprised, and I actually commented on this to him. He was extremely intelligent and articulate, and I was not unimpressed. Whereas I've had some people on, the people said, "Oh, go and get this person on," and they're crap, you know, and they're an idiot. But this person this young guy was extremely intelligent and also very, very funny. I think I was saying to him in the show that's very, very important. That's something that we kind of have is humor. The left, they want to be taken seriously, as we discussed earlier. They're narcissistic. They can't laugh at themselves. They get offended very, very easily, as people that are insecure tend to. And so, but what it was, the humor is one weapon that we have with the memes and so on to convey our message, because what you're dealing with is obviously an ideology that is ridiculous, an ideology which is trying to tell you. I mean, I accidentally watched the other day a remake of The Darling Buds of May. It's called The Larkins. Now, I mean, this is a joke. It's set in 1959. Are you trying to tell me that there would be an enormous Nigerian-looking taxman in 1959 that would turn up on a farm in the rural Kent, and the fact of him being an enormous Nigerian-looking person wouldn't be commented on, and there'd be another person who was, I don't know, from Somalia or something, living in the village? Oh, and that would just be perfectly normal. Nonsense. We know that's a complete lie. The reason they're doing it is to, well, they say that it's because they want equality. Why can't black people play these roles? That's nonsense. Why don't they make something interesting? Why don't they make I'd be really interested, for example, to watch a series about life in colonial India. I'd perfectly happily watch that. So it's not that they can't have roles. It's in order to rewrite the past. It's in order to gaslight people and make them feel confused. And it's in order to make people feel a sense of dysphoria and unhappiness about something sacred, history and truth, being interfered with. And it's a way of saying to those people, look what we can do to you. We have power over you. You may feel disgust. We don't care. This is what we can do. It's a way of making people unhappy and confused, and thus more pliant. And it's a deliberate tactic. And so it's laughable, though. I mean, it's the idea that you can take it seriously is laughable. I mean, I heard today that Bristol University. I mean, God, that was my second choice university after Durham. I mean, if I'd have buggered up my A levels, I'd have gone to Bristol University. At Bristol University. Now recognizes not just transsexuals, but people who identify as cats, and they have a specific pronoun, which is like ning or something, which apparently is Japanese for meow, and it comes from these cat people that you get in anime or whatever the young people watch.
Yeah.
right? Now, I mean, like, now to be fair, there was a South Park episode about 15 years ago about transsexuality, where they have Mr. Garrison having a sex change, and then they have Charles
I know it.
Dolphin
where
plasty.
they ruthlessly mocked that. And now you have a situation where there was a girl at Bristol University who was severely harassed by the alphabet people just for saying that only biological women can give birth. And that's, I mean, for goodness sake, she didn't say only women can give birth. She said only biological women can give birth. Now that's clearly a fact. That's obviously, you can't dispute that.
Comedy's dead in this country, isn't it?
But by saying it, it was a bit like saying white lives matter when you during the Black Lives Matter thing. Or all lives matter. Even by saying it, even though it's true, you're kind of you're showing that you're not sufficiently subservient to the faith. And I think that is a big part of these lies. Like if you look at Christianity, the Trinity. Okay, you could probably find someone to come on here and argue that the Trinity is logical and reasonable. Bollocks, it's not. And it's not meant to be. It's meant to be that you show your submission to the group by engaging in an act of intellectual submission, by asserting that you believe something which makes no logical sense. You are saying, this is not logical, but I am so trusting of the faith, of the brilliance of you, the group, that I will forego my logical faculties, and I will trust that you know best. And that's what you're saying. If you turn around and say, yeah, biological women can have penises, then you are engaging in such an act. And if you do the opposite, if you say no, that's like doubting the Trinity, and therefore that shows that you're a danger to the group, and you're a danger to the thing that is giving those individuals their sense of power and their sense of importance, and is sort of keeping them away from confronting the void at their hearts.
Well, that's the clown world we live in. That really is the clown world we do live in. So obviously we'll move on to a final few questions here. But obviously, as you know, with the INN, Independent Nationalist Network, on my right here, myself, we like to go out there. We like to do stuff, for our communities, for our people. But what's your advice as an activist here in England or anywhere around the world, actually, as ourselves? What do you recommend doing as an activist? What can we do?
I'm not an activist though.
Well, what do you think we can do better than what we're already doing for our people?
No, I don't know that I can. I mean, one of the things that used to be a problem with nationalism in the UK is that it had this this association with yobbos and thugs.
Yeah.
And it maybe has gradually been decoupled from that, because you've had things like the identitarian movement and these sort of young, as you would expect, young, educated people. Because remember, that's who's breeding. Control for intelligence, and it's right-wing people that's breeding, and and it's highly heritable. So I'm noticing over the last 20 years a change in the nature of the kind of people that are involved in this, and it's a gentrification, a slow.
Yeah, it's not the EDL anymore. Do you know what I mean? I think there's so many people, native people, that just literally had enough. Immigrants coming in left, right, and centre, being lied to by the government. And then you're seeing like the adverts.
It's the overt lying. That's the thing. That's the thing with communism as well. It's that you end up with this cycle of individualism, and this cycle of virtue signaling, which we've got, until you end up with just people being confronted every day, all the time, with lies.
Yeah.
And people feeling a sense of it's like communism saying, "Oh, look, there's food everywhere, and we're really rich," and then you look outside, and you're like, and to try and present the Victorian London as multicultural, even 1970s London as multicultural, except for a few parts of it, which they do, is a lie. And everyone knows that. And people are discussing these things. They can't say them in public, of course. They can say them on YouTube and whatever, but perhaps they can say them on they can't say them on television, though. But people are discussing these things, and it's slowly meaning that people are brave enough to go above the parapet and say this is just ridiculous. And people that are not even that extreme.
You even get my parents, they don't really get involved, but they're like, Yeah, Chris, I just pause the adverts and forward wind them now because of, as we spoke about earlier, like you'd think like if an alien just came down and watched adverts, they just think, oh, it's just like white people with black people all the time, and you know, and they're like sick of it. It's just being pushed in their faces, propaganda being pushed in their faces. So I think that's why it's taken away from like the folk style, because maybe back in the day
it was fine in the 90s when you had the occasional token non-white or whatever. That was kind of, it wasn't reality, but reality was probably what commercials were like in the 80s. But it was a sort of a tolerable balance between reality and trying to hold together a multicultural society. But this has just got to the point where it is absolutely, you know, ridiculous. I mean, you cannot watch anything ever and it be socially or historically accurate.
Exactly. All the programs that are being remade now. I mean, you wouldn't ever. I mean, like, and I wouldn't blame them. Like, imagine like you know, Brad Pitt playing Nelson Mandela in a film. The riots that would cause alone, and and we have to accept.
But you shouldn't have to. That's another thing that's bad, though. You shouldn't have to remake things. That's the problem. So we have declining IQ. We're losing IQ at the rate of about maybe as much as 3 points per generation. Certainly about 1.5 points per generation. And the result, we are suppressing genius because we have this woke culture of being concerned about equality and harm avoidance, whereas what genius is about something new and original, and that always breaks vested interests. It always upsets people, and so the result is that we can't produce anything good anymore. We don't produce things that are good. We're not clever enough to produce things that are good. We're not creative enough to produce things that are good. So all we can do is remake things from back when there was a generation that was more concerned with truth, that was more intelligent, and was therefore better able to make accurate, interesting stuff. I think it's interesting that in that sense, the light of artistic civilization has passed to Korea. Korea seems to be going through our 1970s stroke 80s stroke early 90s now, i.e. is basically a monocultural society with high levels of social trust, concerned with truth, but it's not too group oriented. It's questioning the group oriented values a little bit. And that's what we were doing at that point. Now we've questioned them so much that they've fallen apart. They've been replaced by individual-oriented religion, and so now there's nothing creative, nothing original, and all we can do is just remake the Darling Buds of May, for God's sake. I mean, it's not like it was made in black and white; it was made in color. Why can't you just reshow it? Or what are they talking about now? Remake Only Fools and Horses. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's in color. Just reshow it. We can't come up with original, creative, funny stuff now, because one reason I think is because you have to in order to suspend disbelief, everything else has to be realistic. So if you're going to have a zombie movie that sucks me in and makes me believe this, then everything else has to be realistic, socially realistic, accurate. And that's what the Korean stuff is like. You know, the policemen are men. And everyone's Korean. It's like what it's like in Korea. Oh, and then there's zombies. You know. Whereas if you're going to have a zombie movie and also you've got the propaganda element, then it's less believable. It sort of sucks you in to a lesser extent. It's just less good art. And I think that this is, and then also the fact with comedy, a big part of comedy is making fun of people. It's making fun of things. It's sending up stuff. There's a
that don't exist anymore because everyone's just snowflakes. Not us, obviously.
You can't do that, and so you just end up with this clapping comedy of the racists, you know, Nish Kumar and people, and then of course we're not promoting our best. In Korea, they're still promoting their best. They promote people based on merit. Whereas in an individualistic oriented society, it's as bad as a group oriented society. A group oriented society promotes people because they're part of the aristocracy, let's say, not because they're good. We promote people because they're part of the anti-aristocracy, not because they're good.
And so I think this is why the Cultural Revolution thing will come full circle on it. But I see, because their entire sort of argument is almost always propped up on lies, you know. So it's only a matter of time before, you know, and like you say, the polar views of these things. Okay, all right, the people on what I would probably say our side maybe don't speak up enough about because they're too busy working and doing, you know, other things that seem more important to them. And meanwhile, sort of the left are taking over the sort of narrative show. But I just found that video so white pilling, Ed. I really did, because I was at that point in time, I was getting a bit lost and a bit defeated and a bit kind
Which
of,
video was this? Which video?
The Cultural Revolution video that you did.
Yeah,
It was a while ago. Sorry, I'm probably calling you on something that you might not even remember so clearly, but it was a big video to me, because it sort of gave me faith that what we were doing wasn't for no reason. I wasn't just going to sort of be screaming.
Oh no, it's not. No.
Old,
And you'll enjoy the book that's coming out in the summer, "The Past is a Future Country," which
brilliant. I look forward to that.
draws upon that. But yeah, I think there's definitely a movement in the direction of travel that implies. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'm hopeful. Very hopeful.
Okay, before we wrap up, obviously you got your own books coming out, but do you have any, for the audience, do you have any other books you would recommend to the audience to read?
What, by me or by somebody else?
By someone else. So you can promote your book as well
I would recommend reading Frank Salter's book on ethnic interests. I would recommend reading J. Philippe Rushton's book, Race, Evolution and Behavior. And I would recommend reading. I really enjoyed a book by Simon. Oh God, History Debunked. I forget his, God, what's his name? It's a book on slavery. That was a real eye opener for me. Goodness me, History Debunked. He has a YouTube channel, very interesting.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah.
I can't remember his surname. I've gone completely blank. Simon. Oh God. Anyway, it's a book about slavery. Anyway, it's called
Simon Webb.
The Simon Webb. That's it. Yeah. It's a book called fascinating book, really brilliant book. It's called The Forgotten Slave Trade: The White European Slaves of Islam. So if you're feeling particularly guilty about your hereditary part in slavery, then have a look at that book, and you may start to think rather differently. I think that's very much worth reading. So that's some reading to be getting on with, I think, certainly.
Very cool.
All right, thank you very much. Let's get to some final thoughts then, and we'll end the show. Can you still hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Okay.
That's fine.
No, it's okay. Mike's a bit dodgy at times, but I'd like to just say a massive thank you, Ed. Maybe we'll have a catch up in a few months or so. Just massive thank you. It's an absolute honor to have you here. You're an absolute legend. I hope if anyone's watching this show somehow and doesn't know you, please go and subscribe and watch all these shows. I can't speak highly enough of you. You've learnt me a lot as well this evening. Been good to ask you a few questions. I hope you've enjoyed yourself as well. Most importantly, we'll go to you shortly. We'll go to Joe, and you can have your final say after that, Ed. But yeah, just much appreciated. And please go and subscribe to this guy. And over to you, Joe.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, just reverberating that really, Ed. It's been a pleasure to kind of sit with you in the virtual world for an hour. It's been brilliant. Thank you for coming along, and Chris, thanks for having me. This has been really, really interesting, really good fun.
I forgot about you. Yeah, thanks, Joe, as well. Thanks for coming. Thanks.
No, don't worry. No, and apologies, guys. I'm working like 70-hour weeks at the moment, so it's kind of I'm very tired, but it's
No, you've done well. You've done well. And please go and also subscribe to the INN. Ed, the dance floor is yours. Promote anything you want. Say whatever you want. Just many thanks for being here.
Thank you. No, I just want I've already promoted my book, haven't I? But thank you for having me, and it's been an interesting chat. And I hope I also enjoyed it when we chatted last time a while ago. Thank you for having me, and I hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, thank you, and we'll see you soon. Peace out, people. Have a great night.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Chris.